July 10th, 1941, 10:23 hours. East of Smolensk, Western Russia. The first hint that something is wrong isn't what you see. It's what you don't see. No dust plume. No clattering BTs throwing tracks in panic. Just the shimmering heat over endless wheat and, far beyond that, the dark smear of a trillion hiding whatever the Red Army has left. Oberleutnant Karl Weber squints through the open cupola of his Panzer III, goggles pushed up on his forehead, the summer air baking his face. The engine hums behind him, that familiar Maybach growl echoing in the turret ring. Around his tank, too. Company, Panzer Regiment 25 fans out in textbook formation, short-barreled Panzer IIIs and a few Panzer IVs nosing through waist-high grain, holes swaying gently. They look like sharks cruising a golden sea. Karl feels untouchable. For 3 weeks, ever since crossing the Bug River with 7. Panzer Division, it's been the same pattern. Column on a dusty road, orders crackling over the Fug 5 radio, then a sudden flurry of burned trucks, overturned Soviet guns, and scattered infantry running for the woods. The enemy's tanks, when they appear at all, are mostly T-26 and BT series. Thin armor, flat plates, good targets. His gunner, Dieter, has a running joke. One for each gear, he says whenever they roll out. We'll leave them scattered from 1st to 5th. Today feels no different. It's already hot enough that the tar on the road behind them had bubbled. The wheat smells sweet and dusty. Flies buzz whenever they stop, so they don't stop. Karl drops into the turret, then pops back up to his periscope, scanning. Range, he calls down to the driver. Still 800 meters to the tree line. Her Oberleutnant, Hans answers, voice muffled through his headset. Clear in front. Radio, Karl says. Any word from Vorn? From the recon boys. Otto, the funker, taps his headphones and adjusts a dial. A cigarette stub tucked behind his ear. Forward elements report scatter resistance, he says. Lighted guns. Nothing heavier. Major says we keep pushing. Keep the pressure. Of course. Hitler's war is about speed. Shock. Keep the enemy off balance. Push, push, push. Karl nods to himself. Turret loaded? He asks. Jaw, Dieter says, patting the side of the breech. Panzer granite, 5 centimeters. Ready to send another friend home. Franz, the loader, grins, sweat making runnels in the dust on his face. You can almost feel the confidence inside that cramped turret. It's thick enough to taste. They've heard rumors, of course. Stories at fuel halts. Talk from other divisions. New tanks, someone said near Orsha, around a smoky field kitchen, with a gun like an anti-tank cannon and armor like a bunker. Everyone laughed. Every war has stories like that. Karl had shrugged, chewed his bread, and gone back to counting fuel drums. Now, east of Smolensk, the wheat shivers in a breeze that doesn't reach the men inside the tanks. Contact, left of center, someone crackles over the radio net. A voice from another panzer, urgent but not yet alarmed. Movement at the tree line. Probably more BTs. Karl snaps his head back to the periscope. There. At first, it looks like a trick of shadow, something dark sliding between the birch trunks. Then another, and another. Panzer IV, he orders. Line abreast, drivers, watch those intervals. We don't bunch up. The Maybach roars a little louder, the hull vibrating under his boots as Hans gives the tank more throttle. The wheat slaps against the glassy. The dark shapes at the tree line step out into the light. And Karl's brain does a small, confused double take. Those are not BTs. The tanks coming toward them are wrong. Too low, too wide. The turret sits squat and mean on a long hull, the gun noticeably thick. The armor doesn't shine flat like the T-26. It angles, top and front, plates swept back in ways Karl's never seen in steel before. And the tracks, wide as a man's chest, chew through the soft ground without sinking. What in God's name is that? Dieter breathes. Karl doesn't answer. He doesn't know. The leading Soviet tank halts briefly, as if sniffing the air, then keeps coming. Range, he barks. Dieter's already estimating. I press to the sight. 600. Closing. Karl forces his voice steady. Gunner, target lead tank, he says. 5 centimeters PSGR. Aim for the glassy. Driver, hold this line. Someone on the company net is shouting now. Unknown type at front. This is not BT. Repeat, not BT. No time for panic, Karl growls, more to himself than anyone else. We killed French tanks. We killed Matildas. We'll kill this. He hopes. Few are free, he snaps. Inside the turret, the world shrinks to the gun. Dieter squeezes the trigger. The 5 centimeters KWK barks, the recoil slamming back, the tank shuddering, spent casing clanging off the turret floor as Franz already reaches for another round. Through the sight, the shell streaks toward that strange, sloped front plate. It hits with a sound like a sledgehammer on an anvil. The German crew expects a flash, a plume of smoke, maybe a turret popping open. Instead, they see something Karl has never seen a tank do. The shell ricochets. It sparks, shrieks up and away in a wild arc, vanishing into the sky. The Soviet tank keeps coming. Unhurt. Was Zum Teufel, Franz whispers. What the devil? Dieter swears, hard and fast. It was good, he says, voice tight. Square on the nose. No effect. No effect. Karl feels his mouth go dry. That's impossible. Steel behaves a certain way when you hit it. Everyone knows that. Behind them, another Panzer III fires. Same result. A bright spark. A shriek. Nothing. On the net, voices start stepping on each other. Shells bouncing. No penetration. Das Ding ist verrückt. That thing is insane. The Soviet tank stops now, just long enough for its own gun to dip, settle, and fire. The boom rolls across the wheat like distant thunder. A Panzer to Karl's right. Helmet's tank, 222, jerks as if kicked by a giant. A fist-sized hole appears in its turret front, a neat, black-edged puncture. For a heartbeat, the tank just sits there. Then flames blossom out of the commander's hatch, licking sideways in an ugly orange tongue. 222 is hit, someone shouts. Turret, they're burning. Karl clamps down on the rising panic. Loader, AP again, he snaps. Aim for the turret ring, Dieter. Try the joint. Franz slams another panzer granate into the breech, muscles working, face set. Loaded. Fewer. Again the gun barks. Again the shell hits. Again it screams off that cursed angled armor. Now there are two of the Soviet tanks, fanning out, presenting those wickedly slope hulls and swinging their guns with a smoothness that makes Karl's stomach twist. Farther back, emerging from the treeline, he catches a glimpse of something even bigger, taller, with almost vertical slab sides and a turret like a bunker. That can't be real. Bigger one behind. Dieter mutters, seeing it too. Looks like a KV type. If that's the gun I think it is. Another Soviet round tears through the wheat and slams into a Panzer IV ahead, ripping through the side, hurling armor shards and dirt into the air. The tank slews, stops, smoke already pouring from the hatches. Otto's voice shakes over the intercom. Regiment is calling all forward units, he says. Reports of heavy, new tank types. They're asking for identification, for weak points. Tell them we're still looking, Karl snaps, even as he knows how insane that sounds. Tell them. He stops. What is there to tell? That their proud Panzerwaffe has just met a tank that shrugs off their best shots at battle ranges they consider comfortable? That the stories at the field kitchens were true? In the space of 90 seconds, the comfortable script of Barbarossa has been torn in half. The crew hears it in his silence. For the first time since crossing the frontier, someone in Karl's turret says the quiet part aloud. Franz whispers it like a curse. Maybe we shouldn't be here. Outside Smolensk, in a field that was supposed to be just another stage for another easy victory. German tank crews have just watched their shells bounce off a machine no one briefed them on. And somewhere behind the Russian line, there are more of them. Many more. For a moment, the battlefield becomes very small. It's just Karl's Panzer, the wheat, and the thing in front of him that refuses to die. The Soviet tank has stopped now, hull angled, guns slightly depressed. The slope plates of its hull catch the sun in hard, geometric planes. You can almost feel it staring back. Traverse right, 5 degrees, Karl says tightly. Let's see if the side is kinder. Dieter grinds the traverse wheel, the turret whining as it swings. Franz already has another AP round ready, sweat dripping off his nose onto the brass casing. Side plate showing, Dieter mutters. Distance 500 now. She's closing. Fewer, Karl snaps. He doesn't even wait for the echo. Through the narrow vision block, he watches the white puff on the Soviet tank's flank. The shell hits at a shallow angle. Again, the bright spark. Again, the shrieking ricochet. The only difference this time is the sound of German voices breaking on the radio net. Unseer Graniten prallen ab. Our shells are bouncing off. Ist wie ein verdammter Bunker aufketten. It's like a damned bunker on tracks. Someone else is screaming coordinates, their voice going high and thin. In the background, Karl hears the sharper crack of a Soviet 76mm gun and then a roar of static as another set drops off the net mid-sentence. Calm down, he growls. as if discipline can reach through ether. Otto, give me regiment. Now. Otto fumbles with the set, fingers slick. I'm trying, Herr Oberleutnant, he says. The net is crazy. No kidding. Out ahead, the lead T-34 lurches forward a few meters, then slews left, showing even more of that mocking, angled side armor. Behind it, the bigger shadow, KV-1, Karl is almost sure of it now, grinds along, slow and implacable. Driver, back us off 10 meters, then hold, he orders. Keep the hull straight. No exposing our side. Hans acknowledges with a clipped jaw, hand sure on the levers even as his pulse races. The Panzer rocks back, wheat flattening beneath its tracks. A spray of dirt jumps in front of them as a Soviet round slams short, throwing clods against the glacis. You can actually hear the fragments hissing past the turret like angry hornets. In another tank, close enough that Karl can see it clearly, a Panzer IV commander is standing half out of his cupola, binoculars up. He never gets to finish whatever he's about to say. A 76mm shell punches straight through his front plate and low out high. The turret explodes in a brief gout of flame, the commander disappearing in a burst of smoke and flying metal. When it clears, the tank is still, hatch hanging open like a dropped jaw. Got him, Himmel, Franz whispers. Don't look at them, Karl snaps. Look at him. He doesn't say the T-34. He doesn't have a name yet. It's just him, the one that their weapons don't impress. Finally, the radio cuts through the chaos. Alle Companion, this is Regiment Stab, a controlled voice barks. We have reports of new Soviet heavy and medium types. T-34 and KV. Repeat T-34 and KV. Do not engage frontally at range. Aim for flanks, tracks, rear. Air and flak will be tasked. Hold them. Bleed them. Don't die for heroics. They give the monster a name, and somehow that makes it worse. Dieter barks a humorless laugh. T-34, he says. Good to know the name of the thing that kills us. Karl grabs the throat mic. This is Oberleutnant Weber, 2. Company, he says. We got at least 2 in front of us, plus 1 KV. Our 5 centimeters is bouncing. 7.5 on the IVs, too. Request immediate flak, 8.8, or Stuka's on my grid. There's a pause. Distant artillery rumbles. Then the reply. Artillery is busy. Luftwaffe committed elsewhere. Flight batteries moving, but you must hold. Repeat, you must hold. Use maneuver. Maneuver. Against something they can barely scratch. Jol, Karl says, because that's what you say. He drops back into the turret fully now, flipping the cupola hatch mostly closed. He doesn't want to be a silhouette for that Soviet gunner. Driver, swing us 30 degrees right, he orders. We're not staying his lane. Gunner, you see that gully to our right, running toward that copse. I see it, Dieter says, I glued to the sight. You're not thinking. We get into that, Karl says, and maybe we can pop out on his side at closer range. Maybe. Franz makes a strangled sound. Closer range, he says. We're already inside 600. If our shells are bouncing at 500, Karl says, voice clipped, then we need to be at 200. Or closer. He doesn't add the obvious, which means being close enough for them to swat us like flies. Do you want to sit here and wait for the KV to notice we exist? He adds. Silence. Then Hans speaks up, quiet but steady. I'll get us there, he says. The Panzer lurches as he throws it into gear, swinging them toward the gully. Wheat parts in front of them, golden waves breaking on their hull. Off to their left, another T-34, wary Panzer crew, tries the same trick, veering off to find cover. They don't make it. A Soviet shell detonates against their engine deck, tearing open steel like paper. Flames gush out, the tank choking to a halt. A dark shape, the radio operator, maybe clambers halfway out of a hatch, burning, then falls. Karl, Dieter says softly. Not an officer's title, just his name. I see it, Karl says. Eyes on our friend. Don't lose him. They bounce into the gully, the hull tilting, suspension groaning. The wheat vanishes, replaced by scrub and dirt walls, bits of broken Soviet equipment littering the bottom. Discarded helmets, smashed ammo boxes, a horse's carcass already attracting flies. Down, Karl barks. Keep us low. We go fast until that clump of trees, then we come up shooting. He's gambling everything on one bet, that the T-34 commander is more focused on the panzers directly in front of him than on the ones slanting away into the folds of the land. For a few precious seconds, the Soviet tank disappears from their view. All they have is the sound, that deeper, throatier engine note, the clank of wider tracks. Somewhere overhead, a Stuka screeches by, not diving, just faring west, oblivious. The war in the sky is somewhere else. Down here, it's just steel against steel. 10 seconds, Hans calls. Then we're at the trees. Loader, EP. After that, he ready, Karl says. If we get his tracks, we might need to blind his infantry. Franz's hands move on instinct, muscles long since trained by endless live-fire drills back in Germany. Roundin'. Breach closed. Loaded. Karl counts under his breath. 3, 2, 1. Now he barks. Up. Hard left. The Panzer III surges up the side of the gully, turret already swinging. Sun flares across the periscope as they crest, blinding him for a fraction of a second. Then the scene snaps into focus. The T-34 is there, closer than he'd hoped. Its hull is turned slightly toward them now, nose angled, guns slewing in their direction. Its armor is filthy with dust and soot, but the lines are still brutally clean, the slopes cruelly efficient. This is no lumbering land battleship like the old French Char-B. This is a Predator. At this distance, 200 meters, maybe less, Karl can see chips in the paint where shells have already struck and failed. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he realizes something that sends a chill down his spine dam near as cold as the first shots. They haven't been the only ones shooting at this thing. Gun on left T-34 below the turret at the side, he snaps. Aim low. Track or join. On Dieter breathes. I have him. The T-34's gun twitches, barrel dipping. You can feel the moment hanging there, suspended between two breaths. Who fires first? Who hits first? And, more importantly, does it even matter when your shell might just scream off into the sky again? The moment breaks, first on their side. Fewer. Karl snaps. Dieter doesn't hesitate. The 5 centimeters roars, recoil, slamming into his shoulder through the padded rest. The whole turret bucks, Franz already snatching up another round from the rack. In the sight, the tracer streaks straight for the T-34's lower side plate, just ahead of the drive sprocket. This time, it doesn't scream away into the sky. It bites. Armor chips explode away from the track guard, steel fragments, and mud fontaining outward. The track jumps, flicks, then snaps like a broken spine, the leading links peeling off the idler and flopping down in the dirt. The T-34 lurches hard to one side, nose digging in. Dieter shouts, voice cracking. Track! Track! Franz punches the turret wall with a fist. Inlick. Finally, the Soviet tank doesn't die, but it bleeds. It grinds to a halt. Engine still snarling, turret still alive. The gun swings toward them, now furious. Move, move, move. Karl barks. Driver, reverse, angle us. Hans yanks the levers back. The Panzer III jolts rearward, slipping down the crest of the gully again. A shell smashes into the bank above them, showering the hull with dirt and stones. One chunk slams into the cupola with a loud metallic clang that makes everyone flinch. Low, Franz gasps. He shot low. If we'd stayed. We didn't, Karl cuts him off. We're not dead yet. Above, the T-34's turret rotates, searching for them. It's crippled, not blind. And it isn't alone. Farther along the tree line, another T-34 has appeared, hull down, only the turret and upper glacis showing. To the right, the hulking KV finally grinds into a position where it can bring its gun to bear, turret turning with agonizing slowness. 2 more of Karl's company have fallen back behind a low rise, using the terrain the same way he is. Others haven't been so lucky. 3 blackened shapes already smolder where tanks were a few minutes ago. On the radio, the chorus of disbelief is turning into something sharper, cold, bitter calculation. Front plate invulnerable at 500, someone says, voice clipped. Side only at 200 or less. Aim for tracks. You call that armor? Another voice, older, maybe a lieutenant, says, half in awe, half in fury. That's cheating. Regiment to all forward units. The staff voice cuts in again. Report results against T-34. We must know where they can be killed. Killed. The word feels strange now. Karl thumbs his throat mic. This is Weber, too. Company, he says, forcing his voice steady. 1 T-34 immobilized. Track hit at close range, 200 meters. No penetration of hull. Gun still active. We were falling back to cover. KV present. There's a pause. Then, understood, Weber. Your report matches others. Avoid frontal duels. Use terrain. Flank them. 8.8 centimeters flak moving to your sector. Hold them in place if you can. We must test everything. Test. Like they're scientists, not men. Joel, Carl says, because what else is there? He looks down into the turret. Dieter's face is slick with sweat, eyes wide but focused. Franz's shirt is dark at the collar, hands moving on autopilot between shells and breech. Hans's knuckles are white on the steering levers. We hit the track, Dieter says quietly, almost to himself. We can hurt them. We just have to get stupidly close. Stupidity and bravery look similar from the outside, Franz mutters. Carl allows himself the ghost of a grin. Today, he says, we'll call it bravery. He takes a breath. Driver, forward, he says. Just enough to let the gun up. Gunner, he next. I want to see if we can blind him. Optics, turret ring, anything. Loader, have AP ready after that. You want to annoy him? Franz asks. Annoyed tanks make mistakes, Carl replies. They surge up again, just their turret cresting the lip of the gully. The immobilized T-34 is now turned almost broadside, making itself a smaller target profile. Its gun barrel is slightly elevated, hunting. You can sense the crew inside, sweating and swearing just like they are, trying to line up a shot on a ghost. He loaded, Franz says. Turret ring, Carl orders. Or where would be on a sane tank? Dieter huffs a humorless laugh and adjusts. On, he says. Fewer. The he round slams into the root of the turret, just at the edge of the sloped hull. It detonates in a brutal flash, dirt and steel spraying. For a second, the turret shudders, then stops. Carl doesn't see any dramatic dismounts, no hatches blowing open. But when the dust clears, the T-34's gun is stuck. It twitches feebly, then freezes in a slightly off angle, smoke trickling from around the turret race. You jammed him, Franz breathes. You jammed his turret. Or I annoyed him, Dieter says. Either way, he's not looking at us now. The second T-34 is. Its gun barks. A shell screams in, hitting just in front of Carl's Panzer, throwing up a fountain of dirt. Sharp fragments rattle against the hull like hail. One punches through the track guard, sparks flying. Back down, Carl orders. They slide into cover again. Someone else on the net isn't so lucky. A panicked shout. He's turning, then a cut-off scream and an ugly thudding boom. Another Panzer icon goes dark on Carl's mental map. He presses his lips together. You can almost feel the shift inside him, the click between arrogance and something more sober. Before today, he thought of Soviet tanks as targets. Now he thinks of them by model number. T-26, BT-7, and this new one, T-34. A problem to be solved, not dismissed. On the horizon, a faint, different sound filters through the constant background roar of engines and guns. A deeper, harsher bark, the kind of noise that makes crews on both sides instinctively duck. Hans hears it. Did you? He starts. Carl raises a hand. Another bark, then another. This time, the explosion is on the Soviet side of the field. Through the periscope, Carl catches a glimpse of something dark and thin on a distant knoll. Shielded gun, long barrel. Crew silhouettes. The barrel give a little whip as it recoils. Flak 8.8, he murmurs. Somewhere behind their line, a German anti-aircraft gun has been dragged down to earth again and pointed at something for which it was never meant, but for which it is perfect. Look left. Dieter gasps. The second T-34. A moment ago, a hulking reassurance to its comrades. Jerks as if shoved. A fist-size hole appears low in its hull. A split second later, a blossom of fire blows out of its engine deck, followed by a thick column of black smoke. Joel! Franz shouts. They got him. On the net. A new tone breaks through the fear. Not joy. Not yet. But something like relief. Flak battery engaging T-34s. A voice reports. Armor pierces at 1,100 meters. Repeat. 8.8 pierces them. All units. Mark positions for flak. The KV-1, wiser or simply slower to react, begins to back toward the tree-line, its driver unwilling to test his thick armor against that long German gun. Carl inhales slowly. See, he says to his crew, forcing lightness into his voice. We're not completely naked out here. We just need to use a gun meant for airplanes, Hans says dryly. Whatever works, Carl replies. He keys his mic again. Regiment, this is Weber, he says. We have observed 8.8 centimeters flak penetrating T-34 at long range. Our own guns can immobilize tracks and perhaps jam turrets at close distances only. Suggest doctrine. We hold them, fix them with track damage, and let flak or Stuka finish. There's no immediate answer. But somewhere, far behind the wheat and smoke, someone is scribbling that down. T-34. Front invulnerable at medium range to 5 centimeters, 7.5 centimeters short. Flanks and tracks vulnerable at close range. 8.8 centimeters effective. Berlin will get that report too. Guderian will read it. For now, it's just a mechanic's note written in blood on a field near Smolensk. A burst of static, then the regiment's voice again. Weber, acknowledged, the staff officer says, "You are not alone in this. All units, treat T-34 as heavy target. Use terrain. Avoid duels in the open. The Führer and OKH will be informed of this new type." Franz snorts softly. "It'll look different on paper," he mutters. "In a report, it will say, 'New enemy tank encountered. Countermeasures identified.'" Karl doesn't answer. He's watching the immobilized T-34. Its engine is still running. Even crippled and turret stuck, it sits there like a wounded animal refusing to fall over. Dieter says what all of them are thinking, in a low, bitter voice. If they build enough of those, he says, we're going to run out of tricks. He's not wrong. The first T-34 they've knocked out in front of Smolensk has cost them 3 tanks and a piece of their invincibility. And this is just one field, one skirmish. The Soviet Union is big, very big. How many of these machines are waiting out there, just beyond the next line of trees? Same day, July 10th, 1941. 22:40 hours. Forest bivouac west of the battlefield. The forest smells like pine sap, hot metal, and a sour tang of burned oil. The battle east of Smolensk is a dull, distant rumble now. Occasional artillery thumps, the odd rattle of machine gun fire echoing through the trees. Out here, under the dark canopy, it feels like another world. A world made of silhouettes and cigarette embers. Karl Weber sits on overturned ammo crate, tunic unbuttoned, collar open. His Panzer stands behind him in the half-dark, engine clanking softly as it cools, armor streaked with dust, and something darker in places he doesn't look at too closely. The company has pulled back to reorganize, which is a polite way of saying, to count who's still breathing. A single hurricane lamp hangs from a branch, casting a weak yellow pool over a makeshift table, a couple of planks on fuel drums. On it lies a map, creased and stained, rocks pinning down the corners. Hauptmann Kruger, their company commander, leans over it, shadow cutting his face into sharp planes. He's speaking quietly with the battalion adjutant, fingers tracing lines through the forest toward that cursed field. Behind them, tank crewmen sit in little knots on boxes on fenders on the bare ground. Some talk, some just stare. The bravado from 3 weeks ago is gone. Shell shock doesn't always look like shaking hands and 1,000-yard stares. Sometimes it's just silence. Dieter drops onto the crate next to Karl and offers a cigarette. Karl takes it, lights it off his own, the flame briefly illuminating both their faces. Dieter's eyes look older than they did that morning. "How's your shoulder?" Karl asks. "I'll live," Dieter says. "The recoil reminds me I still have one." Franz comes over, canteen in hand. He looks at Karl, then at the others scattered around. "Helmet's crew," he says quietly. "Any word?" Karl doesn't answer right away. He doesn't have to. The empty space where 222 should be, the burned-out hole they passed on the way back, those are answers. "2 out," he says finally. "1 died in the turret. 1 at the hull. The others," he shakes his head. "Not found." "You mean not found in one piece?" Dieter mutters. They fall silent. Around the lamp, other fragments of conversation float in the night air. "I tell you, I saw him hit that thing 3 times. 3. Shells just. We thought the French Charbie was bad. This is something else. Like a bunker on tracks. Sloped, can you imagine? Why the hell don't we have sloped armor?" At the map table, Kruger straightens, rolling his shoulders. "Listen up," he calls, voice cutting across the low murmur. Conversations die down. Heads turn. "Regiment wants after-action impressions on the new Russian types," he says. "Not the fairy tales from cooks and clerks. From you. From those who saw them." He looks around deliberately. "We will send a report up the chain tonight," he adds. "The generals want to know what we faced, how we fought it, and what worked. If we don't tell them the truth, the next company will die believing old stories." He nods to the adjutant, who has a pencil and notebook ready. "All right," Kruger says. "Who engaged AT-34 today?" Hands go up. Karl's among them. "So," Kruger says, eyes on him. "Weber, tell us, in your words." For a moment, Karl feels every face turn toward him. The only sound is a crackle from a nearby fire and the faint hiss of cooling exhaust. He draws on a cigarette, buying half a second, then lets it out. It's fast, he says. Not like a lumbering heavy. The tracks are wide. It runs on soft ground like a BT, but doesn't sink. Sloped armor everywhere, front, sides. Our 5cm bounced. He doesn't dramatize it. He doesn't need to. Range, the adjutant asks. 500 for the first shots, Carl says. Front glassy. Good hits. No penetration. I saw at least 3 separate strikes from different guns. Same result. Sparks and ricochets. A low murmur runs through the circle. Kruger raises a hand. What worked, he asks. Tell him that too. Tracks, Carl says. At about 200 meters, maybe a little less, we hit the lower side plate ahead of the sprocket. Took the track off. It stopped. We hit around the turret ring with he and may have jammed the traverse. It was still alive, but crippled. 8.8 flak finished another one at longer range. He looks down at his boots. Our guns can hurt it, he says quietly. We just have to be too close for comfort. Our shells just bounce, the adjutant mutters, writing. You said that on the net today. Carl nods. Yes, he admits. That's what it felt like throwing stones at a house. From the other side of the group, a voice cuts in, Lieutenant Fisher from 3. Company, face drawn tight. We put 3 7.5 centimeter shells from a Panzer IV into one at under 600, Fisher says. All front. It shrugged them off. KV took its 2. That one. He trails off, then shakes his head slowly. That one is a fortress. We watched the 8.8 aim for an eternity. When it hit, the whole side blew open like a tin can. That's your answer. Big guns or close range. Nothing else. The adjutant scribbles furiously. Describe it, Kruger presses. For the report. Dieter snorts. Describe it, he says. It's a monster. A monster we were never warned about. Heads nod. The word lands and sticks. Monster. That's what it felt like, Franz says. We hit it. It kept coming. You know that feeling when you punch someone and your hand hurts more than their face? Like that, but with a tank. Someone at the back, a younger loader from another crew, says what's been lurking in all their minds. Do you think Berlin knew? He asks. About these things? Silence. Kruger stares at the map for a moment. Then, carefully, intelligence talked about modernization, he says. Possible new types. They did not say, our current guns will be useless frontally. It would have been nice to hear that part, Dieter mutters. Laughter flickers around the circle, bitter but real. Kruger raps the table with his knuckles. So now we say it, he says. Plainly. No boasting. He nods to the adjutant. Right exactly, he says. Quote Weber. Our shells just bounce off the T-34's front at 500 meters. Side only vulnerable at very close range. Tracks and turret ring are targets. Recommend more 8.8 centimeter support and improved AP rounds. The adjutant writes the phrase shells bounce in big, underlined letters. One more thing, Kruger adds. Tell them about its mobility. And the gun. What did you see, Weber? 76 millimeter, I think, Carl says. Sharp, flat trajectory. It can punch through our front plates at ranges where we're just scratching it. Some of our hits were already on its hull when we engaged. Paint scars. It had survived other fights. It's not a one-off. There are more. He looks around the circle. And if they build enough of them, he says, echoing Dieter from before, we are going to run out of tricks. The words hang in the air. No one contradicts him, because they all saw it today. The way the familiar rhythm of attack, sight, range, fire, watch them burn, broke against a shape they didn't understand. Kruger exhales. All right, he says. Good. Hard truth is better than a comfortable lie. He folds the map. Get some rest, he tells them. Tomorrow, we may face them again. The Staffel wants more observations. So does Corps. Guderian himself is asking for details. There's a ripple of something at that. Pride, maybe that someone as high as Heinz Guderian cares what they saw. Then it fades, because Guderian's not the one who'll have to stare down another T-34 at 200 meters. Carl stands, stretching, joints popping. As the men drift back to their machines or bedrolls, the conversations resume in low voices. Did you see the way the shells slid off? Like rain on a roof. If we had that sloped armor in France, the Brits would still be stuck at Dunkirk. They built that in secret all these years while we were showing our panzers off in parades. Otto comes up beside Carl, tapping his notebook. I logged everything we heard on the net today, he says. Panic too. Carl, give him a look. Sending that up? He asks. They need to know how it felt, Otto says. Not just what we saw. He flips the notebook open, shows a page. On it, in hasty pencil, are snatches of radio chatter from earlier that day. Our shells bounce right off these things. It's like shooting a church steeple. They never told us about tanks like this. Carl stares at the words. He thinks of the glossy training manuals back in Germany, with their neat silhouettes of enemy vehicles, armor thickness charts, penetration diagrams. No T-34 there. No KV. Those pages now feel like incomplete maps of a world that just got bigger and darker. You gonna show that to Kruger? He asks. Otto nods. Let the generals know what their invincible troops actually say when the shells start bouncing, he says. In another part of the forest, a staff car door slams. Regimental officers hunch over a different map under better light, already drafting the official report that will go up to Corps, then Army Group, then Berlin. It will be phrased more politely. New Soviet medium tank encountered, it will say. Superior armor and armament. Immediate measures required. But behind those dry words are the sentences Carl's crew spoke tonight. Our shells just bounce. It's a monster we were never warned about. And in a few days' time, those words, or the distilled version of them, will land on a desk marked Heinz Guderian. When he reads that German tank guns failed on the fields outside Smolensk, it will force a question no one in Berlin wanted to ask this early in the war. What if the other side's steel is better? July 15th, 1941. Army Group Center HQ, somewhere near Orsha. The map room smells like sweat, dust, and cigarette smoke. The floorboards creak under boots. Teleprinters chatter in a side room, spitting out thin curls of paper. Outside, engines rumble as staff cars arrive and leave in a constant, nervous shuttle. Inside, the war is colored pencil on paper. Red arrows, blue arrows, lines that look so clean, so inevitable, when you don't have to feel the mud under your tracks. General Oberst Heinz Guderian stands at the central table, tunic unbuttoned at the throat despite the formal setting. His finger traces a road line east of Smolensk, lips moving as he calculates distances and fuel. Then an aide clears his throat. General Oberst, he says, holding a clipboard and a stack of flimsy papers. Latest reports from the Panzer divisions. There is something you should see. Guderian doesn't like that phrasing. Something, he repeats. We have a war full of somethings that... He takes the papers anyway. They're summaries, clipped, boiled-down versions of what men like Carl said in the forest a few nights ago. Typed German in neat lines, peppered with unit designations and place names. He reads in silence as the room hums around him. New Soviet medium tank encountered in significant numbers. Designation T-34. Sloped frontal armor defeats, current 5 centimeters and short 7.5 centimeters AP at usual engagement ranges. Multiple hits frontally at 500 to 800 meters produced only ricochets. He moves to the next paragraph. Crews report shells bouncing from hull. Track and turret ring vulnerable only at very close range. Mobility superior on soft ground. Wide tracks prevent bogging. Armament estimated 76.2 millimeters. Capable of penetrating Panzer III/4 frontal armor at ranges where our guns fail. His jaw tightens. He flips to another division's report. Same story. Different field. One panzer officer described the T-34 as a moving bunker we were never warned about. He pauses on that line. He can hear Carl's voice behind it without knowing his name. A moving bunker we were never warned about. The staff around the table watch him carefully. General Oberst Guderian is, to them, almost synonymous with the Panzerwaffe. He wrote the book. He spearheaded the campaigns. He believes in speed, surprise, the long thrust. Now, there is something in the way of that thrust that his doctrine did not fully anticipate. He exhales slowly. What about the heavy type, he asks. The one they call KV? The aide flips a page. KV series heavy tanks with exceptionally thick armor encountered near Luga and further south. Even direct hits from 5 centimeters and short 7.5 centimeters fail at normal ranges. 8.8 centimeters flak and heavy artillery required. Guderian taps the page with one finger. So, he says, in plain language, our current standard tanks can no longer count on overmatching the enemy. Their new mediums are at least equal, perhaps superior, in armor and gun. The room is quiet. One colonel, older, with metal from the last war, clears his throat. This is local, surely, he says. A few new types in limited numbers. The Russian industry is primitive. They cannot possibly. Enough. Guderian cuts him off, sharper than he intends. He looks back at the reports. He sees the repeated phrases. Shells bounced. We were not warned. Tracks only at close range. And underneath that, unspoken but clear, we are not invulnerable out here. He straightens, the movement making his back crack. He walks to a wall map showing known Soviet tank factories: Kharkov, Stalingrad, Leningrad. He taps Kharkov with his knuckle. This is where they build the T-34, he says. We had photographs. Rumors. We did not appreciate what it meant. He turns back to the staff. That mistake will not be repeated. He dictates, words coming hard but precise. Signal to all panzer divisions, Army Group Center, he says. New enemy medium and heavy tanks must be treated with respect. Every report, every detail you receive from company and platoon commanders about T-34 and KV, you compile and send up. No filtering, no smoothing. Our men will not go into battle ignorant. The adjutant starts writing. Emphasize this, Guderian adds, voice low but firm. Front shots at range are a waste of ammunition. Commanders must think in terms of maneuver, terrain, flanking fire, combined arms. Where necessary, 8.8 centimeters guns are to be sighted as anti-tank with appropriate infantry protection. If we cannot build a better tank tomorrow, he lets that hang. He can't say aloud what he's already thinking. We must use brains to bridge the gap until industry can give us steel. He sets the report down. Draft a memorandum to OKH, he says. Ask for priority on higher velocity guns, new AP designs, and investigation of sloped armor for future types. Mention the T-34 by name. Make it clear this is not a rumor. It is killing our panzers now. The staff exchange glances. Sloped armor, higher velocity guns. Words that will in time become Tiger, Panther, Pak-40. For now, they're just ideas on paper flowing upward while men in cheap wool and steel helmets face the reality. Back in the forest, Karl is asleep in his bedroll when the runner comes. Oberleutnant Weber, the young Gefreiter, whispers. Message from battalion. Karl blinks awake, sits up, rubbing grit from his eyes. Read, he says. The runner unfolds a crumpled paper. To all Panzer Companion, he reads haltingly. Immediate tactical directive regarding T-34 and KV tanks. Avoid frontal engagement at standard ranges. Use terrain to approach flanks. Aim fire at tracks, turret ring, and rear armor. When possible, coordinate with attached 8.8 centimeters flak for long-range interdiction. Reports of bouncing shells have been noted at Army Group. Your observations are valued. Your ingenuity is expected. He looks up, eyes a bit wide. Your ingenuity is expected. Dieter repeats from his blanket, voice dry. That means, we read your complaints. Now figure it out, boys. Franz pulls his blanket over his head. I'd rather they said, the war's over, go home, he mutters. Karl reaches for his tunic, pulls it on. He feels something he didn't feel yesterday. Not panic, not quite. Something like wariness. The knowledge that he can no longer drive into a field confident that his gun and his armor are the better ones. The board has changed. So must the way he plays. Get some sleep, he tells his crew. Tomorrow we see if our ingenuity is enough. As he lies back down, he stares up at the dark canopy, shapes of pine branches black against the sky that never really gets fully night this far north in summer. Somewhere behind him, in a better lit room with good chairs and maps, men with shoulder boards full of stars are adjusting their plans because of what he saw today. It's a strange thought. He closes his eyes. When he sleeps, he dreams of shells screaming off steel plates and vanishing into an empty, endless sky. August 1941. Near Yelnya, east of Smolensk. Midday. The dust has changed. It's thicker now, grittier. Mixed in with it is the fine, gray powder of burned things. Wood, fabric, rubber, men. You can smell it in the air even before the engines start. Karl Weber stands beside his Panzer III, sleeves rolled, tunic unbuttoned, chalk in hand. The tank's flank is his blackboard. On the turret, someone has already scrawled a crude outline of the new Soviet tank. Slope plates, long gun, fat tracks. It's not art. It doesn't need to be. A dozen men crowd around him. His own crew, plus younger faces from replacement crews, helmets pushed back, cigarettes hanging from lips, eyes sharp. No one laughs when he draws now. Not about this. All right, Karl says, tapping the chalk against the armored sketch. You've all heard the stories. Some of you have seen it yourselves. This is the T-34. He marks the front glassy with a big X. Here, he says, at 400 to 800 meters? Forget it. Our 5 centimeters and the short 7.5 will bounce. You can waste a rack of ammo, and all you'll get is sore shoulders and a very angry Russian. A ripple of grim chuckles. He circles the side lower plate, just above the track. Here, he says. Close range. 200 meters or less. Flat angle, not from the front. We've seen tracks blown, tanks immobilized. He taps the turret ring. And here, he says, with he, you may jam his traverse if you're lucky. He'll still be alive. But a blind, stuck monster is better than one swinging its gun like a scythe. One of the younger tank commanders, Feldwebel Krantz, raises a hand. Why not just call the 8.8S every time, he asks. Let the big guns handle them. Carl snorts. You think the flak boys are sitting in your pocket, he says. Maybe you get them. Maybe they're busy, or out of ammo, or stuck in the same mud you are. Until that barrel is pointed, you're the one facing it. He underlines the sketch. Doctrine says combined arms, he says. Artillery. Flak. Stukas. Fine. But doctrine doesn't sit in the driver's seat when the T-34 is at 300 meters and closing. He looks them over one by one. You will get bad ground. Bad angles. You will get orders that don't match the field. That's war. What you can control is this. You don't waste shots you know won't work. He taps the front glassy again. If you see this face at range, think smoke and tracks, not heroic penetration, he says. Blind him. Slow him. Then pull him into someone else's killing ground. Dieter leans against the hull, wiping his hands on a rag. And remember, he adds, they're just men inside. Men make mistakes. They crest ridges too fast. They show side armor when they shouldn't. They panic, just like we did the first time. A few heads nod. That first time feels like a lifetime ago. It's been weeks. Still the same summer. Different war. An hour later. Same day, outside Yelnya. They hear the T-34 before they see it. The engine note is different. Deeper, a throaty rumble under the sharper growl of Panzer III and 4 Maybachs. It rolls through the low ground like distant thunder. Contact front, 3 o'clock. Comes a call over the net. Single T-34, moving along the tree line, heading for that low rise. Carl snaps his binoculars up. There, a flash of motion between the birches. A splash of dark against the green. See him, he says. He's alone. Or the first of many, Dieter mutters from the turret. They're in a shallow valley today, the earth rolled into low waves by centuries of water and plows. The road runs like a scar through the center. On one side, a small village, wooden houses, a brick chimney, wells. On the other, fields and scattered copses. The T-34 is angling toward the road. Head up, confident. He thinks he owns it. Carl keys the radio. All Panzers, this is Weber, he says. Let him come. Do not rush him head on. A Panzer IV commander somewhere off to the left snorts. And what? Wave at him, he says. We have shells too, Oberleutnant. You also have families, Carl shoots back. There's flak on the knoll. Let them earn their pay. He glances to his right. On a low hill, partly hidden by scrub, a long, thin barrel sticks out from a hastily dug emplacement. An 8.8 centimeters flak 18, muzzle pointed down instead of up, crew crouched behind the shield. They look slightly out of place here, like a bird with its head in the dirt, but the gun is loaded, traversed, waiting. Carl had spent 10 minutes with the flak battery commander earlier, boots in the dust, hands tracing arcs. You need him broadside, he'd said. We'll poke him. Make him show you his ribs. Now, as the T-34 comes, that plan is about to be tested. Driver, forward, Carl orders. Slow. Show him your nose, then peel off left like you're scared. Hans grins, despite himself. I am scared, he says. That part will be easy. They roll out of the shallow cover, Panzer III showing its front to the Soviet tank at about 800 meters. Immediately, the T-34's turret snaps in their direction. Gunner, smoke, Carl says. One round short. Dieter adjusts elevation, fires. The shell detonates in front of them, belching a thick white screen that billows in the valley air. To the T-34, it must look like a Panzer trying to mask its retreat. Driver left. Make it obvious, Carl says. Hans slews the tank hard, tracks clattering, putting on a show of hurried, evasive movement. They zigzag toward the low ground where the flak can't be seen. We look like a rabbit, Franz says. He's going to chase. That's the idea, Carl replies. They duck behind a rise just as a Soviet shell tears into the spot where they were, exploding in the fading smoke. Dirt rains down, a chunk of sod hitting the turret with a wet thump. See? Hans mutters. He loves us. On the hill, the 8.8 crew waits. The gun captain has his eye to the sight, one hand up. Rua, he says. Wait. In his view, the T-34 emerges from the tree line and begins to cross the road, nose down, intent on the retreating Panzer. He's turned just enough that his side plate is full in view. Now, the flak man whispers. The 8.8 speaks. The bark is different from tank guns, sharper, more authoritative, a whip crack of high-velocity steel. At this range, there is no ricochet. The armor-piercing round slams into the T-34 side like a hate-filled fist. The entry hole is small. The exit isn't. A chunk of hull plate tears free on the far side. For a second, nothing seems to happen. Then a geyser of flame erupts from the turret hatches. The tank shudders, sags, and stops, smoke gushing out in a greasy column. The valley goes oddly quiet. Treffer, the 8.8 gunner murmurs. Hit. Got. Franz breathes. Did you see that? Carl has. Part of him feels a savage satisfaction. Not because men are dying in that burning Soviet cage, but because the monster that made his shells bounce now lies still, cracked open by German steel. On the radio, he keeps it professional. Flak battery, good shooting, he says. 1 T-34 knocked out. All Panzers. Remember, we don't duel them alone if we can help it. We hunt them. Dieter leans against the turret wall, exhaling slowly. It didn't feel like that the first time, he says. Back near Smolensk, it felt like they were hunting us. Carl nods. Doesn't mean they won't again, he says quietly. We were surprised once. We won't be surprised like that again. That's the difference. He looks one last time at the burning T-34. Even on fire, it looks powerful. He knows there are more. Far more. But now, when someone in a staff car somewhere asks, what do we do about the T-34? There are answers beyond shrugging and hoping. Track it. Blind it. Fix it. Let the 8.8s work. It's not victory. It's adjustment. And that's how wars really turn. He realizes, not in big speeches and grand arrows on maps, but in little grim agreements. We will not charge this thing head-on again. We will not pretend our shells work where they don't. We will call the monster by its name, and then we will learn where its armor is thinnest. Behind him, replacement crews are still clustered around the chalk drawing on the tank. One of them, a boy barely shaving, runs his fingers over the chalk circle around the T-34's lower side. Aim for the heart, he says softly. Not its heart, Carl thinks. Ours. We're aiming for the hole in our own belief that we can't hurt this thing. And today, for the first time, they saw that hole close a bit. September 1941. Rail sighting east of Smolensk. Late afternoon. The war smells different at a railhead. Coal smoke instead of burned gasoline. Grease instead of cordite. But beneath it all, that same metallic tang of hot steel and old blood hangs in the air like a habit that won't wash off. Carl Weber stands on the embankment beside a siding, boots crunching gravel, watching a train of flat cars rattle slowly past. Sunlight flashes on metal. Panzers headed east on some errand he's not privy to, field guns, crates. Then he sees it. The T-34 sits chained to a flat car, like a captured animal. Up close, not in motion, it looks even more dangerous. The slope plates are pitted and scarred, dotted with little craters where German shells hit and failed. A white Bockenkreuz has been hastily painted on its hull side, as if to reassure jumpy Luftwaffe pilots that for the moment, this monster belongs to them. For now, the tank's turret is offset slightly, gun elevated, giving it an oddly curious posture, like a wolf whose neck has been forced into a too small collar. A group of officers and technicians cluster around it, gesturing, taking notes. Carl recognizes the collar tabs of Waffenprüfung, Technical Weapons Office. He also recognizes the look on their faces. It's the same expression he saw on his own men the day they first shot at one and watched their shells ricochet. Disbelief edged with a grudging respect. A captain in field gray, leather coat open, runs his hand along the glacis, fingers tracing the slope. Ingenious, he mutters. Simple. No fancy rivets. Welded. Sloped. Why didn't we think of this? A major with wire-rimmed glasses shakes his head. We thought about it, he says. On drawing boards. But we built for parades and speed. The Russians built for this. He raps his knuckles on the hull. A dull, thick sound. Carl steps a little closer. No one challenges him. He's just another dusty panzer officer, but he smells like the front, and that buys certain allowances. From where did you drag this one? The major asks him, noticing his shoulder straps. Near Yelnya, Carl says. They bogged one crossing a marsh. We cut off the crew, took it after dark. Engine damaged, guns still intact. The major nods, jotting a note. And you've engaged others in combat? Yes, Carl says. Tell me, The major says, pen poised over notebook. In your own words, it's the forest circle all over again. Only now the words will travel farther. Carl looks at the T-34. He remembers the first one, rolling out of the wheat like something from a nightmare. He remembers the sound of his shells screaming away into the sky. Our shells bounced off the front at 500, he says. At 600, 700 too. It felt like shooting a church roof. We got one by taking off the tracks at 200. Very close. Another died to the 8.8 at longer range. He shrugs. It's fast, he adds. It climbs things we avoid. Wide tracks. Good suspension. In mud, it is rude. The captain snorts. At least you can laugh, he says dryly. No, Carl says. I'll learn to laugh later. At first, we only swore. He taps the hull with his boot. This one, he says, our men call a monster. A monster we were never warned about. The major writes that down too. He doesn't smile. Berlin will be warned now, he says. This one goes to Kummersdorf for tests. They'll shoot it with everything we have. Then they'll write long reports. Someday, they may even design something that answers it. Someday, Carl echoes. He watches as a crane swings overhead, hooking chains into the T-34's lifting points. The tank rocks slightly as the slack takes up, then settles again. On the side of the turret, in chalk, someone has written a word. Butte. Booty. Prize. It looks wrong on this machine. You think they'll copy it? Carl asks, half curious. The major pushes his glasses up his nose. We're Germans, he says. We don't copy. We improve. He's not boasting. It sounds like a promise he's making to himself as much as anyone. The train give a long, mournful whistle. The flat cars clank forward. The T-34 rolls slowly past, chained and still. Turret turns slightly, as if watching Carl and his men. Dieter, standing beside him, lifts a hand in a half-mocking salute. Send us something nice back, he mutters. Franz spits in the dirt. Maybe next year we get a Panzer where the shells don't bounce, he says. Maybe, Carl says. If we're still here next year. He watches the train until the last flat car disappears around a bend. The white cross on the Soviet tank fading into distant smoke. A few weeks later, somewhere near Roslovel. Rain. Mud. The front has slowed. What was supposed to be a quick thrust to Moscow has become a grind through soaked fields and forests that seem to go on forever. Carl sits in the turret, hatch half open, rain pattering on his helmet. Static hisses in his headphones, punctuated by bursts of clear speech. Tests of firing range confirm. T-34 frontal hull immune to 5 centimeters at combat ranges side penetration only under favorable angles. New AP rounds in development. You can almost imagine the scene playing out hundreds of kilometers away. Kummersdorf proving ground. The captured T-34 set up against an earthen berm, its hull painted with chalk circles denoting points of aim. German engineers in greatcoats directing fire from 5 centimeters guns, then short 7.5, then long 7.5 when they arrive. Each hit meticulously recorded. Each failure noted. Paper doesn't smell like burning oil. Paper doesn't hear the screams when a shot finally finds a seam and the inside of the turret becomes shrapnel and fire. Carl hears only the summary. He doesn't know the names of the engineers. He knows that someone, somewhere, wrote phrases like sloped armor effective and recommend future German designs take note. He knows that the first Panther sketches will carry some ghost of the T-34's angles. But that's all in the future. Right now, the rain is coming down harder, and the radio crackles with more immediate concerns. Enemy armor reported near the village ahead. A company call says, possibly T-34s. Remember the directive. Do not engage frontally in the open. Draw them into the valley. Carl glances at the road ahead. Trees. A dip in land. He has walked this road before, in 100 variations. Dieter, he says quietly. Remember when we thought we were the only predators out here? The gunner grunts. I remember when we thought French tanks were the worst we'd see, he says. Now I dream about angled hulls and wide tracks. Hans chuckles bitterly. At least your dreams are about tanks, he says. Mine are about letters I haven't written yet. The Panzer crawls forward, track teeth biting into mud. Far ahead, thunder rolls, not from the sky but from steel. The T-34 has become a fact of their world now, like the weather and the mud. Not an invincible demon, not just another target. Something in between. A problem that can kill you if you pretend it doesn't exist. That night, by the light of a dim lantern in a leaky barn, Carl finds a spare scrap of paper in his map case. He starts to write, not to a general, not to a report, to his younger brother back in Kassel, who keeps sending him questions about the glory of the Panzerwaffe and the easy victories in the East. Carl stares at the paper for a long time. Then he writes, carefully, "You read in the papers that our tanks are unstoppable. Remember this, the enemy learns too. They build a tank called the T-34 that makes our shells bounce like stones on ice. We are not invincible. We are only men in steel boxes, trying to think faster than the other side." He stops. He doesn't send it. He tears the page in half and stuffs the pieces into his pocket. Even in the field, there are things you don't write down and put in the army mail. But the sentence he didn't dare send will echo later, in other forms, in memoirs and interviews and documentary voiceovers. "We met a tank in Russia that changed the way we fought. And the first thing we said when we saw it was simple. Our shells just bounce." West Germany, late 1950s. The war is over. The maps are gone, replaced by road atlases. The uniforms are gone, replaced by suits, work jackets, mechanics' coveralls. But the tanks are still there. Not in steel. Most of those are rusting wrecks in Belarusian fields or cut up for scrap. But in memory. In the way certain sounds still make men flinch. In the way some shapes, even in dreams, make their stomach tighten. Carl Weber sits in a modest living room, a coffee cup warming his hands. He's older now, hair receding, a small paunch under his shirt. He works for a truck company, spends his days talking about payloads and fuel consumption instead of penetration tables. On the table between him and the other men is a tape recorder, big, boxy, with spinning reels and a little green light. A young historian from a newspaper has asked for recollections of the tank war in Russia. He's especially interested, he says, in first impressions of the T-34. "The men gathered here tonight are from different former units, Panzer Regiment 25, 29, 35. They've been gathered in a rented hall for a Veterans Association meeting. Someone thought it would be a good idea to capture their stories before time, smooth them away." The historian leans forward, notebook open. "So," he says, voice eager, "you were all there in 41, near Smolensk, Yelnya, Roslovil. When did you first meet the T-34, and what did you say?" There's a ripple of laughter at that. Not mocking, just an acknowledgement of how absurd the question would have seemed while it was happening. You don't always remember your exact words when your world suddenly doesn't work the way you thought. But the feeling that they remember. A man with a heavy jaw, former Lieutenant Fisher, speaks first. "I saw one near Liazno," he says, staring into his coffee. "We were used to T-26 and BT. Thin things. This thing came out cops. Low, sloped, fast." He makes a long, slow gesture with his hand, as if tracing its hull through the air. "I remember I said, 'That's not in the manual,'" he says. The others chuckle. Another veteran, a former Panzer IV commander, shakes his head. "I didn't say anything polite," he admits. "We hit 3 times frontally. Good hits. Everyone on the net screaming, 'Fewer, fewer.' Then we watched the shells go away." He taps the table with his finger. "I remember shouting into the throat mic, 'Our shells bounce.' Just like that. Not elegant. Just," he flicks his hand up, miming the path of a ricochet. "They bounce." The historian scribbles. He looks at Carl. "And you, Herr Weber?" he asks. "What did you say?" Carl thinks back. The smell of wheat. The gleam of sloped steel. The first white spark where a panzer granite hit and screamed off like a furious insect. He takes a breath. "I remember saying, 'Fewer,'" he says dryly. "Several times." The others smile. After that, Carl goes on, "When nothing happened, I think I said something like, 'What in God's name is that?'" He frowns, searching. "But what stayed with me wasn't a sentence," he adds. "It was the feeling that we had punched someone in the face and realized we'd hit a wall instead." The historian nods, intrigued. In his memoirs, he says, Guderian wrote that the T-34 inflicted a deep impression on our panzer troops. He called it a very efficient tank and said we needed to answer it. "Did you feel betrayed? That Berlin hadn't warned you properly?" Silence. Then, slowly, Dieter, still wiry, eyes sharp behind glasses, shrugs. "Betrayed is a strong word," he says, "but we felt misled. We trained with silhouettes from France and Poland. Thickness charts. We believed, truly believed, that our tanks and our gunnery made us kings of the battlefield. Then, one morning, we meet something that doesn't care about your drills." He looks down at his hands. "We joked later, of course," he says. "We said, they told us about communism and commissars. They forgot to tell us about sloped armor." More laughter, soft and rueful. The historian flips a page. "In Soviet accounts," he says carefully, "tankers sometimes describe the T-34 as crude. Difficult gearbox. Poor optics. They envied your radios. One said, our tank was a hammer. The Germans had a surgeon's scalpel. How do you react to that? Carl nods slowly. It's true, he says. From what I saw afterward, their tank had strengths. Ours had others. We had radios and better optics. They had armor that made us swear. He leans back. But on the day you first meet a hammer, he adds, it doesn't feel crude. It feels like something that can break your bones. One of the other veterans, a man named Hauer, chimes in. You know what we called it later? He says. Not officially. In letters. We called it the tank we feared most. Not because it was perfect, because it showed up in numbers and refused to die the way we expected. The historian's pen moves faster. Did you ever capture one? He asks. Drive it? Test it. Once, Carl says. Our battalion got one running for a little while. It was like wrestling a bear. Strong but not polite. The driver cursed the gearbox. The gunner cursed the sights. But we all agreed on one thing. If we had gone to war with that instead of our early panzers. He lets the sentence trail off. You can almost feel the historian's future documentary scripts writing themselves. German crews later admitted the T-34 was the first tank to make them doubt. The tape reels spin, capturing their voices. Moscow, same decade. In a smoky veterans club, on the other side of the old front line, Soviet tankers sit under yellowed portraits of marshals and victories. They tell their own stories. Of T-34s bogging in swamps. Of ammo racks catching fire. Of clumsy, shifting, and cramped turrets. But when someone mentions the Germans and their sleek Panzer IIIs and IVs, a grizzled tanker named Sergei laughs. Their tanks were gentlemen, he says. Well-dressed. Good optics. Ours were peasants. Hard workers. Ugly boots. But when we came out of the trees near Smolensk and saw their shells bouncing off our hull, he lifts his glass. We decided ugly boots were enough. History has room for both views. The engineer's analysis and the crewman's first curse. Back in Germany, years later, a documentary director sits in an editing room, splicing black and white footage together. German panzers rolling past cheering crowds in 1940. T-34s climbing over snowy embankments. Burning hulks in black Russian soil. He listens to the interviews he's collected from both sides, headphones tight on his ears. A German voice, old, cracked. We hit it and thought, this must be a mistake. Tanks are not supposed to do this. A Soviet voice, equally old. We felt really safe for the first time. Not from everything, but from that first shot. He threads in Guderian's calm, clipped tones from an archival speech. In Russia, we encountered the T-34. It had advantages over our tanks in certain respects. This required adjustments. Adjustments. You could almost laugh at how mild that sounds, knowing that adjustments meant entire new designs. Panther, Tiger, born from the shock outside Smolensk and elsewhere. The director leans over the script. He writes a line for the narrator. When German tank crews first met the T-34, they didn't quote manuals. They said something simpler. Our shells just bounce. From that one sentence came a chain of decisions that reshaped the tank war on the Eastern Front. And somewhere, in a file box in a German archive, there is still a faded report. Typed on brittle paper, edges fraying. It reads, in part, New Soviet medium tank encountered near Smolensk. Designation, T-34. Strongly inclined armor. Our 5 centimeters and 7.5 centimeters short guns ineffective frontally at 500 to 800 m. Crews report shells bouncing off hull. Recommend immediate investigation of higher velocity guns and sloped armor in our own designs. The enemy has produced a formidable fighting vehicle. We must respond accordingly. No poetry, no drama, just the cold prose version of what it felt like for Carl and his crew that first morning in the wheat. But behind every line is a voice in a cramped turret, sweating, swearing, watching a shell scream off into the sky and realizing that the war they'd been promised, a war of fast victories and inferior enemies, was over, replaced by something harder, more equal, more costly. What did German tank crews say when they first met the T-34 outside Smolensk? They said, "What is that? Our shells just bounce. It's a monster we were never warned about." And then, because there was nothing else to do, they learned how to aim for its tracks, learned to call the 8.8s, learned to live with the knowledge that out there, beyond the next tree line, might be another sloped shape waiting in the wheat. A tank that had changed the war simply by refusing to fall when it was supposed to. Yendi,